Okay, thanks, Zach, and thanks to the Mountaineers and PEEC for inviting me to give this talk. It's now been 10 years since I was on Svalbard, and this has been a nice excuse to get to go back through old photos and sort of relive the experience. Just to give you a little bit of background, I was on Svalbard to take Arctic biology classes at the university that's up there, sort of as like a study abroad experience while I was in my junior year of college. I was really interested in Arctic and alpine ecology, and turns out this is one of the few places where you can go to take those kind of courses. So, but before going out there, I actually had never heard of Svalbard before. So if any of you are in the same boat, we can go to the map here. So here's Svalbard, located about halfway between Norway and the North Pole. It's for its latitude, it's actually relatively warm. It's still quite cold, but the tail end of the Gulf Stream goes up by the western coast of Svalbard and helps moderate the temperatures a little bit. So here, if we zoom in on Svalbard, Svalbard is actually the name of the archipelago, and Spitsbergen is the name of the main island. So some of you may have heard of Svalbard referred to as Spitsbergen in the past. So we will go just give a quick history of the area. It was officially discovered by William Barents in 1596, and then for the next couple centuries, it was mostly there's mostly hunting going on in the waters around Svalbard or on the land itself. And then in the 20th century, coal mining started to occur in the area. And before then, it was sort of a free-for-all, and coal mining kind of created a need for some more regulation in the area. So the Svalbard Treaty was signed in 1920, and that gave Norway legislative and administrative control of the area, but it still allows free access to any of the 50 signatory countries, and also allows anyone from those countries to have economic rights on the land. So today, coal mining still occurs, but it's been much reduced even since I've been there in 2010. A number of the mines have shut down. The main settlement, Longyearbyen, is still powered off of coal, but they're trying to come up with alternative energy solutions there right now. So with coal mining decreasing, research and tourism are really the growing industries there right now. One of the nice things about Svalbard is it's probably the easiest place in the high Arctic to access. So this is just a map showing my flight path to get there. I was at school in Maine at the time, so I flew from Boston through Reykjavik to Oslo to Tromsø to Longyearbyen, which does still look like a lot of flights, but they're all regular commercial flights, so it's really pretty simple and not terribly expensive to get up there. So I arrived on January 10th in the heart of the polar night. So it's 24-hour darkness at this time. I just want to mention here that a lot of the photos I'll be showing you are ones from my friends up there. I had a terrible point and shoot camera that pretty much just turned off immediately for the first 4 weeks I was there, so I was not able to take a lot of pictures early on. My photos are usually ones with a weird timestamp in the corner, and the accuracy of that timestamp varies, so don't give that too don't think about that too much. So here we are looking down the valley in Longyearbyen, which is the main settlement in Svalbard, about 2,000 people. As students there, we lived at the far end of town in an area called Longyearbyen, and in these old mining barracks. Sounds terrible, but they're actually refinished and quite nice. Here's another photo. So although it's dark on days when the moon's out, it's actually pretty easy to get around without a headlamp or anything. So the first thing you do when you're a semester-long student on Svalbard is something that I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with. You do a bunch of training. So we do a week-long safety course that focuses on a lot of the precautions you need to take traveling in the high Arctic. The big thing is polar bear safety there. There are more polar bears than people on Svalbard. So anytime that you leave the main town, you're required to, or strongly encouraged to, carry a rifle, and also a signal pistol or flare gun. We're actually able to check them out from school. Every Wednesday was rifle checkout day. Not everyone in your group needs to have a rifle, but we usually have one per 5 to 6 people. We also went over glacier travel, of course, avalanche safety, sea ice. There's a good amount of travel over sea ice. Then basic first aid, navigation, emergency equipment, especially like emergency communications devices and things like that. So once you go through your safety course, we kind of settle into daily life in the dark season, which for a lot of people that live there year round, they say that the dark season it's actually their favorite season. It's a very cozy and social time, which is really nice, especially arriving there in January, because gave me a chance to get to know all the students up there really well. There's about 60 to 70 students who are there for a whole semester at a time. And the way the university works is it's 50% Norwegian and 50% international. So it's a really diverse group of students, and just a really great group of people. Everyone is always like super excited to get out and do trips and stuff. So never without an outdoor partner up there. So let's see. So just on a daily schedule for most of my time up there was taking classes, and we were living out here in the far end of town, and would walk into school every day, which is about a 3-kilometer walk down there. So to suit up for school, I'd usually wear hard shell pants and jacket. Usually just hiking boots with yak tracks, because a lot of times the road is just an ice sheet, and carry a 40-liter backpack or so with extra layers and thermos and everything, and head down to school. And this is just, I think this is actually one of my photos because of the poor quality here. But a lot of times you really can't see a lot in the dark season. It's hard to sort of get your bearings. But this is the walk down to school out of the student area. This is downtown Longyearbyen. Here's an example of a bad timestamp. Here's getting down toward town. You can see at this particular time there's a bit of a thaw, and the road became just a complete sheet of ice. It was really difficult to get down to school on those days. And here we are at the end of town looking across the fjord. Moon's out here, so it's actually pretty nice day. And this is the University Center in Svalbard, or UNIS. So we'd get down to school after our walk, and the first thing you do, get inside, and there's like a big coat room where you drop all your shells and boots and everything. So in Svalbard, it's culture to remove your shoes when entering a building. So for some spaces like the grocery store and stuff, you leave your boots on, but for schools, libraries, houses and everything, you always leave your boots at the door. So we would always just walking around school and in socks or slippers, and it's actually pretty nice that way. And we soon discovered, so I was in the biology program there. Turned out that the biology curriculum was not particularly rigorous. There are 4 departments there. There's biology, geology, geophysics, and Arctic technology, which is some kind of engineering. And biology was by far the easiest department. So kind of lucked out there and had a lot of extra time to pursue other activities. So the first thing that the biggest purchase I made while I was up there was to buy a backcountry ski setup, which I honestly wasn't a great skier before going to Svalbard, but wanted a way to get out of town, and skis seemed like the best thing to have. So I got some skis and started skiing the peaks around where I lived. So this is just to orient you again. Here's where we live, down in Longyearbyen. And then there's 2 glaciers pretty much right out the back door, Lars-Breen and Longyearbyen. So a common ski would just be to go up the moraine, up on the glacier. Sometimes we'd just ski down the glacier. Other days we'd climb Trollstein here, or Larsjeta over here. Nordenskjold is also a good peak to ski. And then pretty much once you're going down, you can ski right back to your front door, which was pretty awesome. Here's just the next couple slides are just some photos from some early season ski trips. This time of year, it's really nice. There's this kind of fairy tale pink light a lot of the time. It's maybe like 4 hours of this kind of dusky weather or dusky light. Here we are climbing. This was going up Trollstein. Nice ridge along the edge here to the top. One of the best things about getting out into the mountains was that we got to see the sun earlier than anyone else staying in town. So if you got up high enough, the earliest I was able to see the sun was February 14th, so about 5 weeks after arriving. And it was up and down in about 10 minutes, but it still felt great. The other thing we do a lot in the dark season was cabin trips. The Student Association actually has a cabin in this valley nearby called Bjorndalen, sitting right up here. It's a picture of that. So you could basically just reserve the cabin when you wanted to, head out there. You can actually take a taxi from town to about here, and then you just walk across the valley and up to the cabin. So that was a nice thing to do in the dark season. But really that time went by pretty fast, and on March 8th, the sun returned to town. This is a big deal in town. We have a week-long festival celebrating the sun coming back. It's called Solfestuka. And the first place in town where the sun hits is the old hospital steps, which are shown by this sign here. And on this particular day, it was actually cloudy in town, so the sun actually didn't ever hit these steps, but at the correct time, someone shot off a flare gun and then they started playing Here Comes the Sun. So you can see it's a large gathering here. There's lots of little kids in town, all wearing their big snowsuits and little sun collars here. Here's some of the kids. And one of the big events that goes on during the week is this sledge building competition. So some of my friends and I entered this, it's called Tashansen. Our sled was a Sundae for Sundae, and we thought it was going to be pretty fast because it was made off of an actual sled. Felt pretty good about our chances here, and it was terrible. We only made it about a third of the way down before the sled stopped, and we had to just run the rest of the way down. Here's some of the other sleds that people built, so you can see the contrast between ours and theirs, and we were nowhere near competitive in this event. All right, so now that the sun's back, the sun comes back really quickly. We usually at this time of year are gaining about 20 minutes of light per day. So every day is very different. And with the sun back, there's just a lot more time for either really long day trips or overnight trips. So I did this long trip with some friends over our Easter break. Here's our route here. So we had kind of a big group for this trip. We had 10 people, and we're out for five nights, 6 days. This trip was a cross-country ski trip. So most of us were actually we had a big stash of what's called student equipment, stuff that we could just rent for free. And so most of us were on sort of janky old metal edge cross-country skis with either a 3-pin binding or a telemark binding with some pretty old skins on those. We probably spent about 3 or 4 weeks getting all our gear together for this, really just patching kits together to have enough to make this trip work. We started down here at Bjørndalen, which is near where that cabin was that I showed you, and went up the valley here. Let's see, I think I have one more slide before we get started. So after all our prep, the night before, one of our trip members made us a cake. It's a little hard to read here, but the cake says, "We will survive." So there's 10 of us little gummy skiers on the cake, and we did make it, so it was a success. But let's see. All right, so here's us leaving. We actually took one of the Svalbard taxis to right about here and loaded up all our gear, started out. Between us, we had, I think, 4 polkas or sleds, and then I have a 65-liter backpack here, and we were able to make do with that, which is really pretty minimal. Here we are hiking up Bjørndalen. The skins on our skis were really pretty terrible, so there was a number of times where we had to take off our skis and hike. Fortunately, Svalbard is pretty windblown and doesn't actually get that much snow, so it's not too bad to have to boot pack here. We got a bit of a late start on the first day because of some issues with the taxis getting stuck. So we are still skiing here at around 12:30 at night and get to camp around 1:30. So we have, between the 10 of us, we had 2 4-person tents. And the way you usually camp on Svalbard is you either have a polar bear guard, or you set up like a tripwire setup around your camp. We did the polar bear guard method. So we had 8 people sleeping at a time, and 2 people would be out on polar bear guard, usually about 2 hours at a time. And this actually isn't that bad once you're in the light season, because it's pretty pleasant to sit out there, and especially it's 2 people. And we were just kind of taking the views. We also played a lot of Yahtzee on this trip, so sometimes we just play Yahtzee while we were on polar bear guard. Probably wasn't the best for guarding, but we were okay. And so camping here, the temperature is usually about, gets down to about like minus 25 Celsius, so like negative 10 to 15 Fahrenheit. The sleep system I usually used was like I just had a 25-degree down bag that I put a liner in, and I put all that inside what's called a Järvenduk, which is a Norwegian thing, which is kind of like an insulated waterproof blanket that acted like a moisture barrier, sort of like a bivy sack. I was able to stay pretty warm with that. I'd usually put foot warmers on just before going to sleep, and was able to stay pretty comfortable that way. Oh, here are some Svalbard reindeer that we saw the next day. These are, the Svalbard reindeer are super common. They're their own distinct species of reindeer. You can see they look kind of funny, like a cartoon sheep or something. They are extremely fat, have short legs to help keep them warm, and they travel very, very short distances. So they're about as common as seeing a deer here, but these ones were pretty close to our camp. Here we are the next day, climbing out from where we had camped the night before. This was a situation where we had to take off our skis. So what we did a lot of times going uphill was to have a rope tying an extra person to the pulk to help pull the sleds up. So this is nearing the top of a long climb here, looking pretty beat. And here's our group, or 9 out of 10 of us here at the top of the climb, sort of regrouping before we go on to the next part of the day, which was this really nice open plateau area. We got there around like early evening, and the light was just beautiful out here. Nice views over the water. Almost kind of looks like we're in the desert here, and there's sand dunes. So we really enjoyed getting up here. The sun started to set as we got further across, and it was just a really beautiful night of skiing. So at this point, we're somewhere around here, and then we sort of lost track of things around these squiggly lines in our track. This isn't an actual GPS track, but this is what I sort of estimate happened. We needed to find a way down to a cabin here, and had a lot of trouble finding the right way down, going across this big flat plateau. So it took a couple tries for us to find the right drainage that we could get down safely with our stuff. But we eventually got there. Another late night, I think we got in around 12:30 that night. This ended up being a pretty long and cold day. And we got to this, what's called the Russian cabin, So Svalbard has a lot of cabins around the whole island, and a lot of them are open cabins that you can just, anyone can go to for free. So this one was actually pretty nice. It's right on the water. 2/3 of it is a cabin, and then the last little wing of it is like a Russian museum, sort of unexpected, but cool. We ended up spending 2 days here. The first day was really just like sleeping and regrouping from the 2 days before. Here's us in the cabin, just eating and drinking. There's a little coal stove in the cabin in there. And, oops. And then we're also playing a lot of Yahtzee on this trip. So there's some competitive Yahtzee going on there. Oops. And kind of continuing to hang out, relax at the cabin. My friend Teresa here brought her knitting, and just sort of enjoying the area. We took our sleds made a jump and spent basically an entire day sledding. This was on Easter. And here is our trip group, the 10 of us. And so then it was finally time to leave the cabin, start heading back. And so the next day we headed out here, past Solfestuka, up this valley, and over into Fardalen. This is pretty fast skiing because it's in the valley, so it's fairly flat. So we were able to cover a lot of mileage that day. Here's us packing up to leave the cabin, snowing a little that day, kind of a dismal day to leave. Solfestuka is another old mining area. So there's a lot of abandoned structures here. There's this cemetery that we passed, which is kind of interesting because it's now, can't be buried on Svalbard. So the joke is that it's illegal to die on Svalbard. But the main thing is you can't bury bodies there because they don't decompose. So if you do die on Svalbard, you have to get shipped somewhere else. Okay, here we are at our last camp. This was day 5, camping near Fardalen. We actually got to camp at a reasonable hour this day. And then the next day, we had to do this long climb out of Fardalen to get back into town. This is a couple kilometer climb, and by this time all our old ragtag gear was kind of failing, and we had, I think with me, there's 3 of us attached to 2 polkas trying to get up this last climb, with skins falling off our skis, and one of us only had 1 ski by the time we got to the top. And we got to the top after probably an hour or more of climbing, and there's just these 2 random German guys up at the top, and they saw us and they came over and gave us chocolate, and it was the best. And from there we we're at the top of Longyearbyen, which is one of those glaciers that I showed you. That's right near the student barracks, and so from there it was a nice gradual ski down and back home. So we did survive that trip. And the last trip I'll talk to you about real quickly is some field work I was doing, because I was actually in school taking classes and stuff. And one of the things we did for my polar ecology and population biology class was to look at plankton communities in ice-covered and open water. So we had collected the open water samples, and this trip was to go out to one of the nearby fjords and collect samples from an ice-covered fjord. So we went to Billefjorden, which here's Longyearbyen, and Billefjorden is over here. We were sampling somewhere around here, I think. So to get there, we take snowmobiles, or up there they call them snow scooters. I think we went like through this valley and around like that. It's about a 100-kilometer drive to get over there, and it takes about 4 hours. Here's some photos along the way, some cool glaciers we passed. All of us on our snowmobiles were carrying like a big sledge behind, so we were carrying a lot of equipment out there. We had this like cool octagonal canvas tent that has a little stove in it, so we're all able to sleep in there. Pretty cozy and nice. And so spent mostly the first day getting there, and then setting up the hole in the ice to take our samples. So the method to do that is to usually use like a gas-powered auger to drill a bunch of holes, and then you use an ice saw to cut out blocks. This was a lot of work to do that, to cut the blocks. I was on ice saw, taking a turn with the ice saw, and was like really hammering on the blocks to try to get one free. And all of a sudden, as I was really going for it, I just saw the ice saw slip through my hands and drop 200 meters down into the bottom of the fjord, which was, I felt terrible, because we only had one ice saw, and you may think, why didn't we bring multiples? And the reason was that there's another group going the month before, and the other American in our class also dropped the ice saw into the bottom of the fjord. So yeah, reputation is not particularly good, but we were able to make do and get this hole dug. And then you can see we've got this cable attached to the snowmobile to raise and lower the equipment that we're putting down under the ice. And so the next day we were doing our sampling, and the plan was to take our samples in the morning and then drive home after. But about midway through the morning, this big bank of fog rolled in, and in the direction that we needed to go home. And so there was no way that we could get back that day. So we drove across the fjord to Pyramiden, which is an abandoned Russian mining settlement. It was only abandoned in 1998, so fairly recently at the time. But it's pretty dismal looking. You can see these birds sort of just circling around in a kind of creepy way. And so there's one, although it's abandoned, the hotel bar is actually still open there. So we went to the bar, knocked on the door to see if we could stay there to wait out the storm. And there's 4 Russian guys there who were just like, yeah, you guys can stay here. We're just about to leave in our helicopter. So, oh, okay, that's weird. But they said, just don't let anyone else in. Like, oh, okay, we won't do that. But it sounded a bit like the plot to the start of a horror movie, but it was pretty much our only option at the time. So we stayed in the bar, and basically at this time, our professors told us just to eat and then try to sleep, because we didn't know when we would be able to go home. So pretty much just had to be ready to go at any time. They were checking in with the university over the sat phone to see what the weather was doing, and in the meantime we were just hanging out here. Ended up staying there for about 7.5 hours. So before we got enough of a window to head back, this was, I think, about 7:30 when we ended up being able to start driving back, which was really, really slow going because it was still foggy, and it was just pretty exhausting to be driving the snowmobile for that many hours, having to be like uber focused on what you were doing. So we finally got back sometime in the morning there, and it ended up being a much more exciting trip than the group that went the month before had. Now to just wrap up, the last 2 months I was there went by really fast. We're fully into the midnight sun here. This is, I think, at like 2:30 in the morning. It actually seemed to get a little bit brighter then. And just lots of trips, busy times. Here's some pictures of town when it's sunny out. You can see everything is like, all the buildings and stuff really brightly colored. And it's a pretty nice little town. Here's some friends on a bigger ski trip we did, kind of circling all the mountains around town in one day. And so just kind of to recap on the time I spent here, this is just showing the area that I covered in those 5 months. This included Pyramiden with a snowmobile, and then Barentsburg, which is that one's actually an active Russian mining town that we accessed by boat for another school trip. So it's really didn't cover a lot of ground over those months, but it was really just kind of an in-depth exploration of our backyard in Longyearbyen, which is kind of like what a lot of us are doing now. If we narrow it down to where I actually went on skis, we have this little square here. So really limited travel, but got to see everything in really great detail and just get to know that one little area really well. So if I ever go back, there's a lot more to explore. But honestly, one of the best things about being in Svalbard was the students up there and our little community up in Nibien, and that's always changing. So it's never the same if you do go back. And I'll just wrap up here with these pictures. So as a biologist, one of the things that I really missed being up there was plant life. And this is for my last night in Svalbard. There's the purple saxifrage was finally blooming, so it seemed like a good send off to get to see that the night before I left. So these are all a bunch of biologists getting super excited over this flower in the moraine. So that is it for me. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison. That's just a fascinating trip and a crazy area that I can't imagine being there. We do have a lot of questions and people can keep typing them into the chat. I'll try to get to as many as I can here. I do realize that it's 8 o'clock, so if you need to sign off, just click that leave meeting. And we did record this, so we'll have it up on the PEEC YouTube channel, hopefully within a week. Okay, so some questions for Allison. First, where does the electrical power come from? Do they have a coal-fired plant?
Yes, they have a coal-fired plant, and they're trying to look for alternative options right now because it's oops, okay, because it really doesn't look great for a community that does so much global change research to have this giant coal plant on one side of town, but that's still what they're using right now.
All right. What first interested you about Arctic ecology?
I spent a lot of time doing doing like Arctic or alpine plant ecology in my first few years of undergrad, just in the limited East Coast alpine areas, and was just really fascinated by plant life in these like really extreme environments. So that's why I was looking to go someplace north.
All right. Why was student housing so far away?
I am not sure. It that's the mining barracks were there before, and I'm not sure if they were just trying to utilize what was there already. I
I can
know real
imagine there's not much
estate
like
and down in
construction going on.
what was that?
I can't imagine there's much new construction going on, so maybe that's kind of what they had to work with.
Yeah, it's pretty limited, and it's also really expensive. So it actually wasn't that expensive for me to pay rent living up there. But I'm sure if it was someplace closer, it would be a lot pricier. And it kind of allows the students to have their own little community too, which is nice.
All right, so we had a couple people ask this question. It's very serious. Why are the reindeer so fat when there's nothing to eat?
I think they load up a lot in the summer months. This area of Svalbard on the western side actually is pretty much snow-free in the summer. So I think they're just eating constantly, but they're really, really fat, and they move so little that populations of reindeer in like adjacent valleys are like genetically different because they're so little, because their range is so small.
Wow, awesome, thank you. On your big ski trip, what would have been done if a polar bear was sighted while someone was on their polar bear guard duty?
So the first thing you do if you see a polar bear approaching would be to fire the signal pistol or flare gun, and a lot of times that's enough to deter the bear. And after that, you would kind of get the rifle ready. We had one rifle, one shotgun, and one signal pistol on this trip. But really, you're avoiding having to shoot a polar bear. Polar bears have a lot of protection, and that is like a very last resort. And there's a lot of laws in what situations you could be in to actually be shooting a bear in self-defense.
Okay, sorry, next. Why didn't you use your backcountry ski setup for the long cross-country trip?
Because we were covering a lot of miles, and because a lot of it was skiing in valleys and on flatter areas, so it's just more comfortable to use cross-country skis for that. There's one guy who brought a telly setup with plastic boots, but the rest of us had like leather cross-country boots, and those were more comfortable for long days.
And about how many miles per day did you estimate, or I guess how many days and how many miles was the entire trip?
I'd have to look back on that. The mileage per day varied quite a bit, but I think it would usually between I think 15 and 20 kilometers a day. So I guess that put us somewhere between 60 and 80 total.
All right, a few more questions about your trip. What about the gear? Somebody said you must have needed some pretty serious cold weather clothing and equipment just to live there, let alone skiing, backpacking, and doing field work. Did you buy everything? Did you get it there?
I bought one nice shell and one pretty nice pair of shell pants. I actually didn't even bring like snow boots with me. I mostly was wearing hiking boots for walking back and forth to school, and then ski boots if I wasn't in town. I wish I had invested in like a big down jacket with a hood, because my jacket was like an Eastern Mountain Sports down jacket with no hood. It was pretty short. But I was able to make do with not very high quality gear. And that's how it was for a lot of us up there, because pretty much all at the time were between, I was 21 at the time, and most of us were 6. So we didn't have like a lot of money to get really high quality gear. But because it's not like Antarctica cold, you can kind of make do with a lot of layers.
All right. Any encounters with polar bears while you were there?
We, on that fieldwork trip, we saw a polar bear across the fjord, like at binocular distance, which is a pretty nice distance to see them at when you're on foot. We had, and then another time I saw one was, there's one that like floated in on some ice that came into the fjord right by the university. And so we had a telescope set up there and could just see it from school. But because I wasn't traveling super far, I wasn't likely to encounter them because I was usually going inland, and you're more likely to encounter them if you're going by the coast. But other people who had snowmobiles and were going further were more likely to see them.
When did the sea ice melt, and does it melt faster on the west side by the Gulf Stream than on the east side of the archipelago?
East side stays pretty frozen. The west side, the fjord that school was on was usually open water, and sometimes ice would come in just for a few days and then go back out. So it never melted. The fjords that were ice covered when I was there were ice covered the whole time. So I'm not sure if a lot of those areas melt out completely in the summer or not.
All right. How many students are in the compound approximately, and does it vary throughout the year?
Yeah, so there's like 60 or 70 that are there for the whole semester. And then there's a lot of students that will come in for, the university has these like 1 month intensive courses as well that are like graduate level courses. And so then there'd be, there's a couple other barracks that tended to have students that were only there for like a month at a time. So it would vary a bit. In the beginning, it was really just the semester group. And then once we get toward like March and April, there's more of those month-long students that were there.
All right. Have you studied any other extreme environments?
I've worked at the northern tree line in Alaska, actually just right after Svalbard. So I spent some time working up there, and then mostly just subalpine forest since then, which is a little bit too bad. I kind of miss working in these environments, but haven't had the chance to go back.
Well, somebody asked, do you want to go back?
Yes.
You didn't mention the seed vault. Is not seen as a big deal.
Yeah, I forgot to mention the seed vault. The seed vault is right in town, kind of on the way out to the airport. I asked about the seed vault as well when I was there, and because I wanted to go inside, and the answer that I was given was that Jimmy Carter came to Svalbard and they didn't let him into the seed vault. So no, you can't go in. No, people can't just go in and see it.
But did they mention it like in any of, you mentioned one museum or, I mean, it's known obviously, but is it that big of a deal?
I think so. I mean, it's pretty important, and I've heard they've had some issues with it recently, actually, with it getting a little bit warmer than they expected. The seed vault's kind of built into the side of one of the mountains, so you just see like the entrance kind of protrudes out. It's got like this glowing jade colored door. But in my classes, we didn't mention it. We didn't talk about it too much. I know there's actually an Arctic plant ecology class that is one of those month-long courses in the summer. So they maybe focus on it a little bit more, but I'm not sure.
All right, so I think that was the last question.
All right.
If I missed any, please raise your hand, but I think those are all the questions that came in from viewers. So Allison, thank you again so much for sharing this amazing experience with us. If anyone would like to join us again, our next scheduled talk is this Friday night at 7 o'clock. It'll be an astronomy talk on the origins of nebulae. And that one will also be free, but you do have to register on our website to get this link to get on Zoom. So do register or look at our website, see what's coming up, and register again. Thanks again, everyone, for being here, and for the Mountaineers to the Mountaineers for partnering with us. It's great that we've been able to make this happen over the past couple months. And yeah, everybody's just saying thanks so much again, Allison. A lot more people saying great job on the presentation, and thanks again.
All right, thank you.
All right.